Hi friends, it's Ms Rachee. Welcome to tonight's Mundo Monday. We're bringing you the world one story at a time. Tonight our story is from Wales. Wales is in the United Kingdom. It is in Europe, west of England. I will show you on our globe and then I have a map because it's kind of difficult to see. So if you look at our map, we are in North America. Roughly where this arrow's pointing, we're west of Philadelphia. This arrow says Philadelphia Art Museum. We are west of the city and here in Havertown. If we travel the ocean, travel to the United Kingdom. And Wales is this little place here. It's difficult to see because my camera will not allow the globe to be clear. But let me show you on this map. So if we travel, we're traveling and boom, here's Wales, here's the United Kingdom. You got your Ireland, you got England, and then Wales is right here. The capital of Wales is called Cardiff, and the people of Wales, they speak English and Welsh. Tonight we're reading the Quilt, Story and Illustrations by Valerine LeBlanc. This book is published by Elofa Publishing. We do not own the rights to this book. The Quilt. Story and Illustrations by Valerine LeBlanc. Before we begin, please keep this in mind. I have something I'd like to show you after story time, so remember these colors and this pattern. The Quilt. Behind our house, a stream flowed. The sheep rubbed against the hawthorns. The gorse and heather drew patterns on the hills, and we lived amongst them. There were no hedges, no walls, no fences. We inhabited the moor, and the moor inhabited us. On spring evenings, the swallows danced in front of our house. We shared the sheep. In winter, the smoke of the peat fires rose in the air in golden whirls. But that winter was rough. The moor shrunk. The animals were hungry, and we were too. There was little to eat, and rarely any meat in the call. We couldn't walk freely in our ancestors' footsteps, and we had to pay a toll to walk the road. More and more often, my parents' eyes wandered over the horizon, beyond the hills, over the waves of the sea. In the evening, by the peat fire, Dad carved bowls and spoons from elder wood while Mam sewed a blanket. She cut triangles out of black and red flannel, the same black flannel used for Dad's Sunday's clothes, the same red flannel used for Mam's dress. While she sewed the triangles into squares and the squares into larger squares, and every stitch, she hummed a song, and every stitch was like a note on a music sheet. Then Mam began to quilt, her arm moving with the regularity of a clock. The embers of the evening fire cast shadows on the wall, reflected in my dad's eyes. As the felted wool and the red thread drew shapes on the blanket, the house emptied. The clock disappeared, the chairs too, then the dresser, and even the kettle. When there was nothing left but the quilt and the clothes we wore, the swallows returned. Spring came, and we closed the door of our little house for the last time. It was a very long trip. We walked all day to the harbor. From there, a boat took us to a big city. We boarded a bigger ship and embarked on a longer voyage. The journey seemed endless. The waves gave rhythm to our days and our nights, and the horizon encircled us. Whoa, look at that. Just look at that. Wow. Do you think it would be quiet or loud out in the sea? Do you think there would be a lot of noise or just the waves? How do you think you would feel on the sea? I don't know how I would feel. It was cold and wet, and the ship was filled with loud voices and unknown languages. How far away was my little stream, the green valleys and the bleating of the sheep? The sadness and hearth grew in me, and the tears rolled down my cheeks. Mam wrapped me tightly in the quilt and began to sing softly in my ear. As she sang, her fingers followed the patterns of the quilt. The black and red pieces formed the shapes of familiar houses and wings of swallows. And the red thread took me over the waves and through the valleys. I saw the swirling and flowing stream behind our house, and the round ripples of stones thrown into the lake. And I felt the comforting smell of the sheep's wool and the heat of the peat fire. At last, we saw the first birds flying overhead, then a line of land at the end of the horizon. The boat docked and we landed. Look at the horizon. Imagine how great that must feel to finally see the land. We passed through great cities and small towns, mountains and rivers as wide as lakes. In the middle of a hostile and unknown land, and one night, my parents made a shelter, and soon a house, a barn, and a garden. They worked constantly. When harass took me, I quitched with the quilt and held it tightly and remembered the warmth of our sheep and peat fire. I followed the contours of my house and with my fingers, its red door, the stream that tumbled down, and swallows flying in the spring. And I could hear the sweet voice of Mam singing. From the seeds sown in our garden grew sweet and generous fruits and vegetables, pumpkins, tomatoes, corn, and blueberry as big as a robin's egg. The delicious smell of simmering cawl filled my nostrils again, and in the following spring, swallows came to nest under our roof. We were home. We inhabited the land, and the land inhabited us. And do you see something familiar? As they sing. So, this is the story of the quilt. Oh, here's our quilt again. And guess what Ms Rachee has to show you? My friends from the knitting group here at the library made me my own quilt. So here's a house right here. We can fold this up and we can see a piece of a house. Oops. We can fold this up. We can see the house. We can see the water. See the swirls of the quilt as the water goes through. And when we're feeling kind of sad and alone, we can cuddle with this quilt. So this quilt will be at the library if you want to come and take a look at it. But if you guys want to make your own quilt, you can try to at home. You can take a piece of paper and you can draw your own designs, or you can take some shapes and make your own quilt that you can design and you can show us. So let's talk about some of that language that we heard in the book. There were some words that sounded a little bit differently than what we might call some of the things that we know. Well, or I shouldn't say no, but some of the things that are familiar to us. So I say soup in my family, but here in this book, soup is called cawl, C-A-W-L, cawl. And when our main character was feeling a little sad, they called it hirath. Let's see if we can find it. Hirith. So sadness and homesickness is a hirith. H-I-R-A-E-T-H, hirith. Sometimes I have a little bit of hirith when I'm far away from home. I miss the things that are comfortable for me. So those are two words we learned today, hirith and cawl. Cawl for soup and hirith for homesickness from Welsh. Oh, that was a great story about leaving home and trying and having to do something new and having to try to figure out a new place. Have you guys ever had to leave your home or leave something that you knew and tried a new thing? Let me know. So with that is the end of our Mundo Monday for tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you all for being available to join me as we journey around the world. Thanks for watching.